Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Huntley. I'm one of the faculty members at USC Games. This is my first time talking at Indicate. I'm super duper pumped to be here. I want to just give you all a quick 10-minute snapshot of something I've dedicated around 27 years of my life in doing, which is marketing. Jesse had a great setup in terms of positioning. We're going to be digging a lot more into that right now. So we talk about marketing for your indie game. Like my background is if you've played with it, eaten it, drunk it, consumed it, I probably worked on it from a brand perspective. When it comes to games, I worked at THQ, not at the same time as Scott Easley, but certainly on a lot of games that you might have played in the last 10 or 15 years. But we start with like, what is marketing? And the answer is sometimes this. It's marketing, people coming in to kind of kill your dreams. And you know what? There's a kernel of truth in that. Some of the marketers that I've dealt with have been more dictating to people like, this is what you should make because this is what the marketplace demands. And that's not, to me, what a good marketer or what a good marketing plan does. What a good marketing plan does is it takes the art and the science of defining who your audience is for your game, figuring out what they want, and engaging with them and delivering it. If you're figuring out who it is that you're making your game for, it's going to be a lot easier for you to engage with them and to get them to care about what you're talking about. A lot of times when I ask students, the student teams we deal with, who are you making your game for? If their default answer is everybody, it's like, okay, that's not really an answer, because if it's everybody, that's a really big target market, and how to get everyone to care. If you could figure that formula out, you probably aren't in school right now. It takes a lot of time and effort to find out who that audience is, and the more clearly you can define it, the more effective you'll be at getting them to care and engage with you from a brand or a consumer or a game perspective. So we talk about marketing. There's lots of stuff. It's a very broad topic. It's been around for a very long time. But the marketing mix, as we call it, consists of 5 things: product, price, place, promotion, and positioning, which we're going to get into here. Jesse set that up perfectly. Positioning is super duper important. That's the part that most indie games and most gamers in general skip that part, because, oh, we're just going to start marketing. And if you don't have a good positioning in mind when you start having a conversation with the consumer, you can easily find yourself going off track or going off the rails in terms of how you're talking to the audience that you want to get at and the way you're talking with them. So what is positioning? From Phillip Kotler, who was a professor at Northwestern, literally wrote it feels like a 20-pound textbook about marketing. It's the act of designing the company's offering and image to occupy a distinct place in the mind of the audience. That's super duper important.
I need your consent on a few items to continue.
That's weird. Sorry, Android. That's super duper important. The occupying a distinct place in your consumer's mindset. That is really the statement is you don't own your brand. Once your consumer has heard about your brand or heard about your game for the first time, they've got an impression of it. It's really, really, really hard to move that impression in that consumer's mind. It takes a lot of effort and time and energy and money in some cases. So it's that old adage of you never get a second chance to make a first impression. It's really about having the intent and the intention of what it is that I'm trying to make, what it is that I want people to take away from the brand and the thing that I'm talking about. You have to know that going into the conversation versus figuring out as you go along. So positioning rule number 1 is know where you're going. There are 4 rules here. I probably should have put a table of contents together like Gordon did, but there are 4 rules here. And number 1 is know where you're going. The analogy I use when it comes to finding your positioning is you're taking your consumer on a trip. You're the pilot of this plane. The consumer is your passenger. Marketing is the plane itself, and positioning is where your destination is. You always want to think carefully about when you start marketing. I've had more than a few people do that. Hey, we came up with a name. We're going to go live and get our website live. It's like, wait. Well, when you launch, if you back away from when you launch, you start with like your final date and then back up to when you want to announce. Because if you don't have something to talk about between when you announce and that final release date, your consumer is going to lose the plot. There's a lot of things just like pulling our attention away from everything that you're talking about. You can see AAA games do it really, really well. They're the ones that start a year plus out and talk about a game that's coming out 18 months from now, but they've got things that they're releasing throughout that entire window to keep you engaged and to keep you from caring or keep you caring. If you're an indie gamer or an indie publisher, you got to make sure you've got something to talk about between when you first talk about your game and when your game comes out. And if you don't have a lot, it's going to be hard to keep the consumer's attention. So it's really hard to pick a destination before the trip. I know it's tough because we're dealing with it in my classes all the time. A good marketer really isn't so much about dictating what you should make, but a good marketer does say, okay, let's all agree what you want to make. If you can define that for me, then I can help find the audience for you, and we can match these 2 things together. So it's almost like, again, that plane analogy. It's easy for me to say I've got the fuel, I've got the provisions, I've got the time to get from point A to point B because I know where point B is. If I take off with my passenger, the audience, and don't know where I'm going, that's when things usually go really, really wrong. I don't have the fuel and the food that I need to get from point A to point B. The consumer's confused as to where we're going to end up, and no one's really happy with the result. So figure out where you want to land before you take off in the first place. So positioning golden rule number 2, first to market in the consumer's mind has an unbeatable advantage. A lot of people think that, but there's a caveat to that rule. It's an old rule that we all kind of subconsciously or unconsciously do. It's called the ladder of positioning. What we all do instinctively when we go shopping is we rank things in our heads, just instinctively. It's something that if you go to a grocery store in the near future, you're going to, or even Amazon, you're going to have that moment of like, okay, what is it that I want to buy? And I'm going to have time for this, but the experiment I do in class is say, hey, think about the first brand you think of when I say soda. And almost everyone says Coke. And if that was the case and Coke was the only soda, then Coke's the only thing that we should be selling and drinking. That's not the case because people, soda companies in this example, do a very good job of finding differences between what is Coke versus Sprite versus Diet Coke versus Mountain Dew. They're creating some space between their competition so that they can own the top of the ladder. They've redefined a ladder and they've taken that first spot. The job that you all have from a game launch perspective is figuring out how you're different, slightly different or majorly different from the people that are around you, from your competition. So a good experiment that we also go through is when I say, you know, what's the number one first-person shooter you can think of, and the answer is usually Call of Duty. But there are obviously multiple first-person shooter games out there. There's a reason why they can survive, and the reason why they survive is they create enough difference between themselves and the number one market leader to say, hey, you should buy us too because we're not like them. We're different in this way. If you can figure out what that hook is, what that is that makes you different, that's what's going to make you stand out from the crowd. That's what's going to make you unique and make people go, all right, that game that does this thing that I've never seen before. Number 3, know your surroundings, who's nearby. This is really, 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 really scary sometimes when you start talking about in some cases, AAA, AA behemoths that you're dealing with. If you're working with an indie budget, indie timing, indie resources, it's like, how do I make sure I don't get anywhere near some of these, larger areas? The answer to that is what we call blue ocean and red ocean. There's a concept called red ocean where if there's a lot of competition in one place, people are going to duke it out, and it's like having sharks in the water, just chumming in the water, and the ocean turns red. Blue ocean is there are no sharks. There's no one here. We have wide open field of competition. There's no one that I've got to go head to head up against with. The thing about blue ocean, because whenever I show this chart, every student goes, oh, well, I'll just do blue ocean then. But here's the thing. Blue ocean is scary. Blue ocean is you're off the map. No one's anywhere near you. You are going to do something that no one's ever done. And the further out in the blue ocean territory you are, the more a publisher who might want to write you a check will go, you really think that's the thing that's going to work? A great example is the first Red Dead Redemption. When I worked at THQ, we were launching the second UFC fighting game in the same window of the first Red Dead Redemption. We were like, oh, it's a Western. No one buys Western video games anymore. We look back on that now and go, yeah. And as you can imagine, did not work out well. We got really, really hard smacked. And the reason why we did was someone made a Western in a video game. Before that, if you pointed to Westerns in video games, I think it was Red Dead Revolver in the previous Xbox iteration. So that was very blue ocean, and Rockstar, made a huge bet financially on the marketing development to actually make that mark. And now they've got a franchise that is going on forever. And then last but not least, the positioning golden rule number 4, and Jesse hit on this in a big way. There are 2 types of products and services in games. There are games that are commodities, and there's games that are brands. There's a functional use of, hey, this thing does this thing, and it checks the box, and it's like it's not something I have an emotional connection to. What you want to go for is you want the players and consumers to have an emotional connection to you. You want them to have an emotional connection with what you're making. If you have that emotional connection, they will care about you. If they don't care about you, if you're just one of the many brands of butter or the many brands of whatever that they're shopping for, no one really goes to shop for a game and says, you know what, I'd like to buy a game, but I don't know what it is. Usually you're going to go in and you're going to buy a game because something's jumped and made it pay attention to it. And usually makes people pay attention to is emotional connection. I'm a huge Halo fan. Whenever I see some of those Halo, CG trailers, I get choked up because I've got like decades of experience playing those games, and it's like this. I'm going to go back in this world. I'm going to experience, fictional life as this character that I love inhabiting. There's a brand connection for me. When you have a new brand that no one's ever heard of, it's your job, your responsibility to build that brand connection. From an indie perspective, sometimes the way to do that is to build a connection with yourself. you end up being, and this is super duper important what Jesse and Gordon said, it's really how you talk to consumers, how you present yourself to consumers, and how much they care about you. I don't want to name names because there's some, some indie developers that I know and love, but when they drop something, I'm like, let's go do this thing. Let's sign up because I like them and I like the work that they do. And it doesn't really matter as much to me what they're making. If you can keep like giving quality experiences to your fan base and to your audience, your fan base starts to gravitate around your title a little bit less and around you a little bit more because you deliver quality. And if you deliver quality and cool experiences, you're someone I want to watch in the future and pay attention to what you're doing so I can buy the next thing or get the next thing or sign up for the next thing. So engage with your audience, make them care, actually have a relationship with them, make them see that, oh, I'm a real human being and I'm working really hard to do something cool for you. And they're going to respond with their money, with their love, and they will help be your ambassadors and be free marketing when it's all said and done to help push your message further out than your budget might allow. And lastly, wrap up, be unique, stand out, and be bold. Do something big, do something splashy. Don't just do it as a one-off, because I had a stunt and then my game comes out in a year, that's not good. If you have a stunt and your game comes out in a month or 2 weeks, that's good. Or if you have multiple stunts leading up to that game coming out, that's super duper awesome. But you need to think about, when does my game come out, and do I have enough things to talk about between when I first announced my game and when it actually comes out to keep people engaged and interested. And I talked a mile a minute. So if you want to reach out to me afterward, here's my LinkedIn link. And thank you so much for your time.